Jai Hind, Namaste, welcome to Galp Taru, the Tree of Stories, which is a celebration of Indian folk tales. My name is Ambalika and I am an author and storyteller, and Galp Taru is my special storytelling initiative on the occasion of the 75th year of Indian independence. If you are new to this channel, heartiest welcome. I am so glad you have chosen to come here, and I invite you to check out all our stories, poems and folk tales that are already available. And if you are a regular, thank you so much. So glad to see you back again. In 1874, Reverend Lal Bihari Dey had published a book titled Peasant Life in Bengal. This was based on his observations of the peasant-zamindar relations when he was posted as an English professor in the government college in Burdwan. This book featured a little boy named Govinda who spent many hours every evening listening to stories told by an old woman whom he called Shambhu's mother. This book, shortly after it was published, caught the eye of Captain Richard Kamat Temple of the Bengal Staff Corps. A folklorist himself, he was quite excited to read about all the storytelling that was happening between Shambhu's mother and Govinda. And he made a suggestion to Reverend Dey that why not collect all these stories told by old women in Bengal to their little children every evening. The idea excited Reverend Dey and he set out to the task. Actually, there was a very personal reason behind it. He himself had grown up listening to so many stories every evening, and in fact, the old woman from whom he had listened to these stories was none other than Shambhu's mother. So it was not a fictitious character, it was a person very much in flesh and blood that he had put into the book. But the folk tales unfortunately had gone away with Shambhu's mother's passing. So now Reverend Dey had an arduous task cut out before him to collect all of those stories, because you see, from a child when he grew and became an adult, all these folk tales that he had heard in his boyhood years had got mashed up, meaning the ending of one story ended up becoming the starting of another story, and the plots got intertwined and everything was lost. But now he faced a dilemma. No Shambhu's mother. Where could he revisit the stories? Who would tell them to him again? Well, he set out on his search and he tracked down an old Bengali Christian woman who told him 10 stories. Wow, that was a good start. And then an old Brahmin told him 2 stories. The going is good. Then an old barber told him 3 more stories. Wow, this was getting bigger. Then his servant at home told him 2 more stories. And finally, all the rest of the stories came from another old Brahmin. Now, Reverend Dey had a very good collection of Bengali folk tales. Now there was another problem. None of his authorities could speak Bengali. And thus, he set about to translate all those Bengali folk tales, and that is how in 1883 the first ever compilation of folk tales of Bengal happened, and that remains our first written record of Bengali folk tales. When talking about Bengali folk tales, it is actually very difficult to separate it from history, especially freedom struggle, because both of them are really intertwined deeply. In fact, the development of Bengali folk tales can be classified into 4 phases. One, which is starting from 1835 to 1885, which was when the missionaries came in and started collecting folk tales. But their intention was not preservation of culture, but to increase the efficiency of their missionary activities. Overlapping with this time period is the time from 1860s to 1885-86, which is when the British civil servants became very interested in knowing about folk tales. Because you see, by then the revolt of 1857 had happened, and it led to the liquidation of the British East India Company and the transfer of its functions to the British Crown, meaning that India had formally come under the rule of Queen Victoria. And so there was this entire system of administration run by civil servants that was put in place, and with them came a lot of scholars who were not just able administrators but also had diverse interests like in anthropology, linguistics, etc., etc. The third phase starts from 1886 and goes on to the time of independence, 1945-47, and during this time the Bengali folklore was used majorly to arouse patriotism and nationalist sentiments. And the next phase was led by Dhaka, because with independence came the partition of Bengal, meaning that there was East Pakistan and West Pakistan, which is present-day Pakistan and present-day Bangladesh. So it so happened that with the creation of East Pakistan, Urdu got imposed as the national language on a population 56% of which spoke Bengali, and there was a lot of dissatisfaction about this, leading to a language movement, and it turned pretty bloody in nature, with a lot of students losing their lives. But eventually in 1955 the movement met with success when Bengali was declared as one of the state languages, and eventually in the 1971 war, in which Bangladesh got liberated, Bengali eventually became their national language, and along with India they ended up sharing Rabindranath Tagore as the author of their national anthem. So from being a source of entertainment for little children in the evenings to becoming a tool for arousing patriotism, Bengali folk culture has a lot to offer. It has seen it so much. So this Bengali language, which is believed to have originated somewhere in the 7th, 9th and 10th centuries and is today spoken by more than 200 million people living around the world, is just so rich with folk tales, proverbs and rhymes that it has always fascinated anybody and everybody who has encountered that language. Also, when we are talking about Bengali folk tales, folk music and folk culture in general, we are talking about a shared cultural heritage with Bangladesh, but it is a unifying spirit. But if you have never encountered Bengali folk culture before, not to worry. I am sure that you would have run into that viral video of the famous Indian actress Kalki Katla singing a lullaby to her baby, which goes like Ghum, Parani, Mashi, Pishi, Moder Bari Esho. If you did listen to that or watch that video, then you definitely have encountered Bengali folk culture, folk music, folk tale, folk rhyme in a very sweet, simple way. Ghum Parani Mashi Pishi Moder Bari Esho, Ghum Parani Mashi Pishi Moder Bari Esho, Khat nai palong nai chok pete pesho, Khat nai palong nai chok পেটে পেশো, বাটা ভরা পান দেব গল ভরে খেও, বাটা ভরা পান দেব গল ভরে খেও, খোকার চোখে গুম নাই গুম দিয়ে যেও, খোকার চোখে গুম নাই গুম দিয়ে যেও, গুম পারানি মাসি পিসি মোদের বাড়ি এসো. It would be wonderful to know the 4 people who have made major contributions to this Bengali folk culture. One is, of course, the person who needs no introduction, Rabindranath Tagore. The second is Reverend Lal Bihari Dey, the person whom we met at the start of this episode. Well, he was born into a moneylender's family, and as he grew up and completed his primary education, his father wanted him to move to Dhaka for secondary education, but unfortunately upon reaching there his father passed away, and he was practically left as a destitute because there was no land for him to live on and earn a living. Eventually he converted, becoming the first Bengali Christian convert, and eventually he also ended up becoming a priest. and he had a good hold over the English language, and not just English, even Bengali, and was a big champion of vernacular education, even though he was a British missionary in the sense of the work that he did. And his position as an English professor took him to various government colleges in the Bengal Bihar region, and that is where he became very closely acquainted with the sad state of affairs between the peasants and the zamindars, and it led to him producing lots of literary works that won awards and accolades. The third person that we need to know of is James Long, who was an Irish priest, and he is being credited with becoming the first person to compile all the Bengali proverbs, and it was made like sort of mandatory for students to refer to that book when studying the Bengali language. And he is also credited for doing something quite revolutionary for those times. He translated the Bengali play Neel Darpan, written by Deenbandhu Mitra, into English, and for this was fined and jailed because this was regarded as a libellous act. The James Long Parani that is named in Calcutta today is actually a tribute to this Anglican priest. And the final person who deserves a mention is Sir George Abraham Grierson, the Knight Commander of the Indian Empire, a British civil servant who was posted at the Bengal Bihar region and was also a philologist and a linguistic person. He was the superintendent of the Linguistic Survey of India, which was initiated by him in 1898, and the results of which he could compile only by 1928 in 19 volumes, by when he was actually a retired person. But my personal favorite is Upendra Kishore Roy Chaudhary, the grandfather of Satyajit Ray, the renowned filmmaker. Upendra Kishore Roy Chaudhary had an unbelievable and unbeatable flair for creating stories, writing them and narrating, especially for children. While Gopi Gayan Bagabayan is his most known and admired work, Tuntuni's stories are also his most beloved and read stories for children. So yes, if you are wondering what is going to be the folktale for this week, you are guessing it right. It's going to be a Tuntuni story. Tuntuni is actually a pet name for the tailor bird which is found in the Asian region. So yes, it's a real bird. And there are many delightful Bengali folktales about this witty tailor bird. Most folktales have a moral lesson to deliver, but Tuntuni tales are different. It's all about how this clever, witty bird outwits its rivals and anybody who tries to upset her. Upendra Kishore Roy Chaudhary wrote many stories featuring Tuntuni the tailor bird, and all of them were put together, compiled in 1910 and published as Tuntunir Boi, meaning the Book of Tuntuni. It is still to be found in many Bengali homes, and it's treasured and the stories read out to the children. In this week's folktale, I'm going to tell you a Tuntuni story, and it's titled How the King Lost His Nose. Sounds pretty interesting to me. I fell in love with the story the moment I had read it 2 years ago, and I can't just wait to read it to you. So while I go and prepare that story, why don't you go ahead, hit that subscribe button so that when the story comes live, you don't miss it. And if you found this episode useful, you learned something new, do give it a like and leave a comment as to what is it that fascinated you. Your comments and encouragement really keep me going. So I do look forward to it every time. So we are going to meet again soon with a Tuntuni story, and until then, take care. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.